Let's watch Fox News liberal Jessica Tarlov absolutely sound off on her MAGA co-hosts for spreading their propaganda surrounding the tragic LA fires, because that's what conservatives do with tragedies, while also helping to set the record straight on some of the propaganda they've been spreading.
There is so much bad information swirling around about the main players involved in this, like the fire chief who's been called a DEI hire. I take her resume any day. 24-year vet, paramedic, engineer, fire inspector, captain, battalion chief, fire marshal, deputy chief. I don't know.
But you're proving my point.
No, I'm not proving
yes,
your
you
point.
are. You're proving it because DEI makes everybody suspect.
No,
that is the problem. And you guys paraded it around. So now you put it in people's heads.
No, you put it in people's heads.
How? I can back DEI.
No, not everyone's suspect. Let's get this clear. It's only Black people, women, LGBTQ, minority groups that these people decide to make suspect. White people are never suspect. They never get their merits questioned because being white is their merit to other white people, which is as racist as can be, might I add. Notice how these people who rail against DEI and how important merit is never call out unqualified white hires. Name one that's been called out on a mass level by conservatives. Notice how Fox hasn't ran endless segments about Trump's objectively unqualified cabinet picks. People called Biden's cabinet a DEI cabinet because he had 7 Black people in it. I went through each one of his ethnic picks. We did this in a video. They objectively have more experience and more qualifications pertinent to the roles than Trump's picks for the same positions. Yet MAGA, who was so outraged at Biden's cabinet, which we were told the reason is because they're unqualified, it has nothing to do with their race, have nothing to say about Trump's picks that have less qualifications. I, for one, as a Black person, am tired of pretending that this blatant racism is like just a legitimate concern for these people. Like, I'm done playing the game, right? When it's clear as day it isn't. Because again, DEI is just used as the justification to questioning the merit of Black people, trying to tear them down, which is something they've always done. They just now found a reason to like pretend they have some sort of moral high ground when they do it, despite, again, DEI being around for 60 years. None of these things they claim have ever shown themselves in any statistical realities. The right is absolutely the one who puts this racism in people's heads by deciding to pretend it means these people are less qualified, because then they could use it to justify their prejudice. They're pretending that they didn't just have the prejudice, that DEI created the prejudice, but that's not right.
There's also, which I think is particularly the most damaging story, which is that there was $17 million cut from the fire budget. And that's also inaccurate. So last year's budget had an extra $17 million because they bought one-off expenses. These SCBAs for respiratory protection for firefighters and new suits. Those aren't in the new budget because you buy them once every several years. Also, there's an additional $50 million that's been set aside for the fire department. And when they were doing the budget negotiations, it wasn't finished. So that money is coming. There will actually be more money in the fire budget next year. In terms of the water.
That letter.
What letter?
The fire chief was complaining about the money. Was that just a fraud?
Well, this is the budget. People have actually gone through the budget versus the article in the New Republic or even the LA Times. Apparently, all 114 tanks were full of water that supplies to the water infrastructure filled. So there were pressure issues.
I don't believe that.
I understand you don't believe that, but I'm saying the LA Times is reporting these things.
Okay, then why they run out of...
Okay, and holy shit, do I have to point out something very pertinent here. Pseudo-intellectuals and narcissists also tend to mistake a lapse in their knowledge for a lapse in the knowledge, which is exactly what's happening here, because these people don't know how something works. They're then thinking it's impossible for it to work that way, especially when they're also trying to be purposefully as obtuse as possible so they can just say Democrats bad and not have to get into the facts or the context that might be uncomfortable to the narrative or position they're trying to create. And because they can just say, nope, I don't believe it, they don't even have to retract the false reporting that they've done for days on the matter, where it was all over right-wing media that Karen Bass defunded the firefighters, the Democrats forgot to fill the water tanks, whatever it may have been, where we now know the budget's been increased, all the water tanks were full. It was a combination of the fact that climate change makes fires worse, thus the demand to fight fires demand more resources, and not having the infrastructure to contend with that, as the hydrants were being relied on for too much and ran out of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted endangered fish, I'd say it's the Karen Bass. Her career is up in flames. She called for unity amid this crisis. There is unity. Everybody there thinks you're a full-blown idiot who should resign. I do think you're going to see rage in the next couple of years, because you can't fight fire with platitudes, pronouns, and politics.
I really want to stress here that Greg Gutfeld considers himself a comedian. I'm not sure if anyone else does, but there's that. Those jokes were totally funny. But what we actually can't let go here is what they're doing in the face of an absolute tragedy, how they're still trying to make it political, still trying to use it against the left. Imagine if after Trump got shot and Republicans were doing their whole fake unity bit, imagine how they would have acted if Democrats, left-wing media, CNN, MSNBC went on and they were just like, well, there is unity. We all thought he should have had better aim, or, there's unity around Trump just dropping out. The victim mentality these people would have portrayed from that would have been insane. They would have never let that go because they are the ultimate cry bullies. They want to be able to simultaneously hold all the power, control all the narratives, politicize any tragedy to their gain, and punch down at those below them while they're at it. But if it even feels like any of this is happening back to them, they will instantly start crying and playing the victim and poor me. These are the least serious people in the country, and they literally now have all the power. I mean, this is the weirdest timeline we've stumbled into.